that's the second chapter of the story that I started to tell with the last novel, because Lou Wasserman pretty much personified the beginnings of the motion picture industry. If you track his life, you can see how it evolved over half a century. And maybe pick up the story with Jack Nicholson, and you can bring it right up to the present. So that was what I thought in terms of the original premise of the book. And I went ahead and agreed to do it. And then I learned all of these other remarkable things along the way. That's what always happens when you set out on a journey like this. What you ultimately wind up publishing doesn't always bear a strong resemblance to what set you off on the journey in the first place. I mean, for instance, who knew that I was going to find out that Jack Nicholson is half Jewish?
Right.
That sort of blew my mind. There were all kinds of things that I found out about Nicholson along the way that were astounding and made for a great tale, better than I had anticipated when I began.
How long did you work on the book?
Oh, probably, around 3 years, I think. 2.5, 3 years.
When did you begin?
Let's see, I signed the contract in, September of, I think it was September of 2005. That's when I signed the contract. But then, of course, I did all of the spade work and the basic research prior to that, or a lot of it, not all of it.
When did you begin the research on it?
Let's see, September 2005 contract would have been, I probably really started jumping in on it in the winter of that year. So I probably started the research maybe, February, March of 2005.
And when did you begin writing the book?
Well, almost immediately after I signed the contract, I started writing the book. But as an author yourself, you know that when you start writing a book, most of what you write finds its way into the wastebasket. So I didn't really start hitting my stride for probably another good 6 to 9 months. Things really began to roll in probably the spring of 2006, I guess. Just guessing now, but I guess about right.
Tom Wolfe said that when he started out writing books, he thought that the ingredients for a good book were 60% writing and 40% material. And then at the time he was interviewed, which would have been in the mid to late 90s, he said it was 90% material, 10% writing. Do you have any thoughts on the composition of a good book between the two ingredients of material and writing?
Well, that's interesting. I've never heard that before.
Neither have I.
That's pretty cool, though. And shows a marked maturity of Mr. Wolfe in terms of his evolution. One of our great guess I would have to agree with that, and probably I would have followed that same evolution. When I first started writing books, like, almost 20 years ago, I guess. That breakdown, that 40-60 breakdown, is how I would have regarded it back then, because I had a much higher regard for my remarkable stylings as an authorial talent. But, there's nothing like time and bad book reviews to instill a little humility in somebody, and along with the good. And, it's great to have terrific reviews and great sales, but I believe in that old adage that you learn a lot more from your failures than you do your successes. And I think I probably have learned a lot, and just as Wolf, I think that having great material really does facilitate it. I mean, it brings out whatever innate talent you have as a writer. If you have a great story and it's there, and you can see it, and you can feel it, and you can sense it, intuit it, it makes it so much easier, because you sit down and you hear writers talk about that magic where it just flows off your fingertips and the story tells itself and all of that other baloney. Well, there's something to that. If you have great material, if you have, you got a great tale to tell, it's so much easier to do it, to sit down at the computer and at the end of 5 or 6 hours of fiddling with the keys, coming up with 2,000 or 3,000 words of stuff that flows and that makes sense, that has a compelling narrative, as opposed to spending 5 or 6 hours in front of the computer screen and coming up with 2 pages, neither of one of which you can even read.
How many books are there about Jack Nicholson?
Biographies? Well, I'm just going to guess here because, and I'm probably not going to be absolutely accurate, but at least a dozen. And probably more if you throw in the books that are specifically about the films that he's made, or that are basically picture books. He's been written about a lot.
And where does your book break new ground?
Well, in 2 or 3 key places, I think. First of all, I think that one of the things that caught me early on when I was first doing the research was, here's a guy who, you have the well-known mystery of his mother, his grandmother posing as his mother for the first 30 years of his life, and his real mother posing as his sister, and all of that. But the one major mystery in Jack Nicholson's life, which up until my book, I don't think it's ever been adequately addressed or solved, is the question of his maternity. Who was Jack Nicholson's father? And always